Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. The helicopter descended over Best Eden Resort, its polished black frame slicing through the golden sunset. Below, the turquoise waves of the private beach shimmered like glass, but Edward Shepherd barely noticed. His sharp gaze was fixed on the screen of his phone, his fingers gliding over emails, financial reports, and contract drafts. The resort's elegance was wasted on him. He was here for one thing only, the deal. "Sir, we've landed," his assistant, Mark Caldwell, announced as the chopper's blade slowed. Edward slipped his phone into the pocket of his tailored suit and adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt. "Good. Have the investors arrived?" "They're scheduled for tomorrow morning. The resort's manager has arranged for your suite, and all meeting materials are prepared. Make sure everything runs without a hitch," Edward ordered as he stepped onto the helipad, the warm breeze ruffling his dark hair. "I don't have time for distractions." He strode toward the main entrance, his presence commanding. The staff, dressed in pristine uniforms, bowed slightly as he passed, recognizing the power he carried, not just in his wealth, but in the way he moved, in the sharpness of his gaze, in the silence that trailed behind him. The resort was a paradise of understated luxury, but Edward had long since lost interest in anything that didn't contribute to his empire. Beauty, relaxation, and leisure were for those who had time to waste. Inside the grand lobby, a young receptionist fumbled nervously as she checked him in. "And Mr. Shepherd, your suite is the penthouse with a full ocean view. If you need anything." "I won't," Edward cut in, taking the key card. "Just ensure I'm not disturbed." As he made his way to the elevator, Mark trailed behind him, checking his watch. "Would you like me to order dinner to your suite?" "Not necessary. I'll review the proposal first," Edward replied, already composing an email in his mind. But as the elevator doors slid open, a sudden sharp voice rang out from across the lobby. "Charlie Dennis, no running." Edward's steps faltered. Something about that voice, a soft melody wrapped in quiet authority, sent a jolt through his chest. He turned his head slightly, catching only a glimpse of a woman bending down to scold two young boys. Her long, chestnut brown hair cascaded over her shoulder as she gathered the children toward her, a small laugh escaping her lips. Something in Edward's gut twisted. His heart pounded against his ribs in a way he couldn't explain. He didn't know this woman, or at least he shouldn't. And yet, as the elevator doors began to close, a strange unease settled over him. "Sir," Mark prompted. Edward exhaled sharply. "Nothing," he muttered. "Let's go." But even as the elevator ascended, something in him whispered that he had just brushed against a part of his past, a past he thought had been buried long ago. The resort shuttle rolled to a stop, and Evelyn Clark stepped out, taking in the breathtaking view of Best Eden. The air smelled of salt and blooming gardenias, a soft breeze playing with the hem of her sundress. But she wasn't here for luxury. She was here for her boys. "Mom, look at the pool." Charlie's voice rang with excitement as he tugged on her arm. "And the beach," Dennis added, already bouncing on the balls of his feet. Evelyn smiled, ruffling their identical golden brown curls. "We have all week, boys, but first, we check in." The receptionist greeted her warmly and handed over their key cards. "Your suite is ready, Miss Clark. I hope you and your sons enjoy your stay." She thanked the woman, but as she turned, a cold shiver ran down her spine. A strange sensation, like she was being watched. She scanned the lobby, but the only people in sight were a suited man disappearing into the elevator and a few scattered guests. "Just your imagination," she muttered under her breath. The suite was perfect, airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the room in golden light. The boys immediately bolted toward the balcony, their excited chatter filling the space. Evelyn set their bags down, but the unease from earlier lingered. Edward's Shepherd assistant had mistakenly sent his luggage to the wrong suite, and now he has to take the elevator to get it himself. Irritated, he swiped the keycard the receptionist had given him and pushed the door open. Laughter, soft, melodic, and unmistakably familiar. He froze. Inside, a woman sat on the floor, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders as she playfully wrestled with two identical boys. Their giggles filled the air as she tickled them mercilessly. their little hands pushing at hers. The scene was so warm, so achingly intimate, that for a moment, Edward could only stare. Then his gaze locked onto the boys. His chest tightened, the shape of their faces, the curve of their smiles. It was like staring into a mirror of his own childhood. Charlie Dennis, enough, the woman. Evelyn gasped between laughs. Go wash up before dinner. The boys groaned but obeyed, dashing toward the adjoining room. And then Evelyn looked up. Her expression shifted from joy to utter shock. No, she whispered. Edward stepped forward, his pulse hammering. Evelyn. His voice was hoarse, his mind reeled. His Evelyn, his sons. She scrambled to her feet, her body tense. You need to leave. But Edward couldn't move. His world had just tilted on its axis. His sons had been here all along, and Evelyn had never told him. Edward sat alone on the balcony of his suite, the ocean stretching endlessly before him. The rhythmic crashing of the waves did nothing to calm the storm inside him. His hands trembled slightly as he held a glass of whiskey, but he hadn't taken a sip. His mind was trapped in the past, in the moment he had walked away from Evelyn 8 years ago. He had promised to come back. He had meant to come back. But one business deal led to another, one city turned into another, and somehow, time had slipped through his fingers like sand. Now 2 little boys bore his face, carried his blood, and he had never even known they existed. A sharp knock at the door snapped him from his torment. Evelyn. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes blazing. You need to stop looking for answers, Edward, she said. You have no right to them. He rose, his jaw tightening. No right? They're my sons, Evelyn. You had no right to keep them from me. Evelyn flinched, but her voice remained firm. You left, Edward. You never came back. I did what I had to do. Guilt clawed at his chest, suffocating him. I was a fool, he admitted, his voice raw. But I swear to you, I will not walk away again. She studied him, something flickering behind her guarded expression. Fear, hope, anger, all tangled together. You don't get to make promises anymore, she whispered, turning to leave. Edward watched her go, determination hardening in his veins. He had lost 8 years. He would not lose another second. The morning air was thick with tension. Evelyn gripped her phone, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the news. Headlines blared across the screen. Millionaire Edward Shepard's secret family revealed. Paparazzi swarmed the resort entrance, cameras flashing, voices shouting. The boys had no idea, but Evelyn knew. This was the beginning of a nightmare. She turned to Edward, who stood at the window, jaw clenched. This is exactly why I kept them away from you, she said bitterly. Edward's face darkened. I didn't do this, Evelyn. A sudden crash from the bathroom made them both turn. A sharp, pained cry followed. Dennis. Evelyn bolted inside and found her son crumpled on the floor, his tiny body convulsing. No, Dennis, she screamed, pulling him into her arms. Edward was beside her in an instant, his voice urgent. We need to get him to a hospital now. There was no time to wait for an ambulance. Edward swept Dennis into his arms and sprinted to the helipad. The blades of his private helicopter roared to life, drowning out Evelyn's panicked sobs as they lifted off. At the hospital, hours blurred into an agonizing eternity. When the doctor finally emerged, Evelyn braced for the worst. He's stable, the doctor said, but he needs further tests. Relief flooded Evelyn's face. Edward exhaled, then turned and strode purposefully toward the waiting reporters outside. Before she could stop him, he faced the flashing cameras and spoke, his voice unwavering. I failed my family once, but I won't again. Evelyn, Charlie, Dennis, I love you. And in front of the whole world, I'm asking for a second chance. Then, to Evelyn's utter shock, he dropped to one knee, pulling a velvet box from his pocket. The crowd gasped. Evelyn's breath caught. The man who once walked away was now begging to stay. And this time she had to decide if she could trust him to never leave again. A month later, the dazzling lights of Paris stretched beneath them as Edward's private jet descended onto the runway. Evelyn gazed out the window, her heart pounding. She had spent years shielding herself from hope, from love, but now Here she was about to marry the man she had once thought lost forever. Charlie and Dennis pressed their faces against the glass, eyes wide with excitement. "Are we really in Paris?" Charlie whispered. Edward chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "We are, and tonight we celebrate." The evening air was crisp as their limousine pulled up to the sealed door, an opulent restaurant overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light, and the scent of fresh roses filled the air. A grand table, draped in white silk, awaited them, set for an intimate yet lavish wedding dinner. Evelyn's breath hitched as she stepped inside. The past no longer loomed over her, only the present, only this moment. Edward took her hands, his gaze steady. "I made the mistake of letting you go once. I won't make it again." With the Eiffel Tower shimmering behind them, they exchanged vows, sealing their promise with a kiss. As champagne glasses clinked and laughter filled the air, Evelyn knew this was the life she and her children had always deserved. Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.